March for Our Lives San Diego is standing for the people against violence.
Established in 2018, March for Our Lives amplified the call to protect one another and end gun violence.
We carry on this mission in our community of San Diego by
calling on local legislators to enact gun reform policy,
promoting civic engagement through various events,
and working to actively solve the gun violence issue on all levels, including law enforcement.
We rep in the fight to end gun violence.
We'll continue to use lived experiences
to guide our messages we wish to convey.
We must put lives over profit.
This is something that held highly in our current societal norms, and we stand against that.
We stand against that.
Our call to action is simple.
We want to stand in solidarity
against the structures in place
that allow for the desire of power over lives.
We want common sense gun legislation.
We want to disarm hate.
Disarm hate.
Disarm hate.
We want protection for all people.
All people.
Join us in our mission today
at mfolsandiego.com.
Because we are
the generation
that will end gun
violence.
violence.
Hello, everyone. My name is Max Costin. I'm the Executive Director of March for Our Lives San Diego. I would just like to take this time to thank all of you guys who are tuning in right now with our conversation we'll be having with Attorney General Rob Bonta. Before we get started, however, I do want to bring up that March for Our Lives San Diego is a completely youth-led organization, as you saw, that is dedicated to the fight of gun violence prevention. With that said, we can't do it without the support that we have from everyone. So if you really want to keep fighting on and help us in our mission, you can go to mfolsandiego.com to join us, or you can go to mfolsandiego.com and contribute a little bit financially to support us, because unfortunately nowadays we can't organize without a little bit of money. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my co-host for the day, Catherine Simon. She is my co-host. She's our press secretary for March for Our Lives San Diego, and she's also here as our event coordinator. So thank you, Catherine, for being here.
Thank you.
And yeah, we're going to just jump in and introduce Attorney General Rob Bonta. Hi, Attorney General. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here with you.
So we just want to start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. For the last almost decade, I've been a California state legislator, so authoring and voting for many of the common sense gun safety laws that you have been advocating for at March for Our Lives, San Diego, and more broadly throughout the state and the nation. I sort of my story starts with my parents, who are social justice advocates and activists, leading on some of the most powerful social justice movements that our state and our nation have known. My dad was involved in the civil rights movement, marched in Selma, stood with Martin Luther King Jr., organized for voting rights and civil rights. Both my parents worked for the United Farm Workers of America. We lived in a trailer, my family of five, my older sister, younger brother, my mom and dad, and that was a stone's throw away from the home of Cesar Chavez. My dad worked in the front office with Cesar. My mom worked in the preschool with Dolores Huerta. And my mom, an immigrant from the Philippines who came here for the first time after a 3-week ship ride at the age of 28, organized and fought for the restoration of democracy in the Philippines. So my family has been part of movements for justice, for greater opportunity, equity, justice, and inclusion. And that's the spirit that I come to the Attorney General's office with. I believe that my role is to be the people's attorney, to fight for everyday people, especially the most vulnerable and the voiceless, those who've been hurt or harmed or abused, and to make sure that the scales of justice are even and that they have a champion, who's someone who's going to see them and value them and fight for them. And I think that's what the job is. And that's how I've approached it. Making the fights of Californians my fights, and having their back and taking care of them. And that includes a very broad range of issues, from criminal justice, reform to corporations, corporate accountability, to environmental justice, to taking on hate crimes, to addressing human trafficking and elder abuse and et cetera, exploitation of children, and certainly also involves protecting and defending our common sense gun safety laws here in the state of California and making sure we're keeping people safe from gun violence. So I just want to say how excited I am to be here with you. March for Our Lives is an inspiration to me. I know that a lot of people say that our young people are the leaders of tomorrow. That while that is certainly true, I say that our young people are the leaders of today. And you are making change now. Your voices are powerful. You have a moral clarity that we don't see in my generation. You know what's right, you know what's wrong, you know what's acceptable, you know what's not, and you refuse to accept the unacceptable. And you're fighting for the world that you deserve. And so when our young people say we just want to be safe in our schools, we just want to learn free from having to have active shooter drills or active shooters, adults, please do more, please be more urgent. I hear that, and that motivates me. So I appreciate this opportunity to be here with you. I have the greatest admiration and respect for you as leaders and for the movement you've created. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your story is definitely very moving. I do want to bring up, however, before we get started, as you brought up March for Our Lives. So I just wanted to say any March for Our Lives chapters, any partner organizations that are watching this right now, go ahead in the YouTube or Facebook chat, type in your name and where you're zooming in from, or where you're watching us from, and your chapter that you belong to if you're representing an organization while you're watching this. But while you guys do that, we're going to get started. So the first thing we want to talk about is the firearm cases that are in the court system right now. So we're going to just start off talking about the assault weapons ban and the court ruling regarding that. So our first question is, what is the existing law right now relating to assault weapons and the ban in California?
So right now we have a assault weapons ban in California that remains in effect. We've had it for over 3 decades. It is the subject of a current pending legal case that is in the courts right now, Miller versus Bonta, and that addresses a particular aspect of what was called the Assault Weapons Control Act, which had a flexible features-based definition for assault weapons. It was focused on that universe and category of firearms, and we had a San Diego District Court strike that assault weapons ban down. So the assault weapons ban, based on that ruling, would have been stricken down, and we challenged that. We moved for what's called a stay, or we moved to block the implementation of that lower court order while we appealed. We got that stay, so the assault weapons ban is back in place while we continue to pursue and make our case in appellate court in front of what's called the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The short of it is the assault weapons ban is still in place pending the outcome of the current case that we're involved in, Miller versus Bonta.
Awesome. So there has been a lot of talk, and there still is a lot of talk about the court decision to strike down the California assault weapons ban. So as the Attorney General and as a Californian, what are your general thoughts on this decision?
The decision to me was disappointing, and I felt it was not sound in when it came to the law, came to the facts, and to common sense. There was reasoning in the court order and in the decision that was disturbing, including equating an assault weapon to a Swiss Army knife, also claiming that without basis that COVID-19 vaccines, not COVID-19, but the vaccines for COVID-19 have killed more people than mass shootings. And so I believe that the ruling was flawed and concerning for sure, out of touch in numerous ways, and frankly insensitive to the victims of gun violence and their families. So it was a disappointing ruling, no doubt.
Yeah, and we definitely share that feeling with you that it is really disappointing, especially the comparison towards Swiss Army knives. And we all know that assault weapons can do way more damage than a Swiss Army knife can. So with this appeal, there is a very extensive appeals process in the federal court system. So do you want to just break a little, just summarize real quick what that process is and where the this appeal for this case is in that process?
Yeah, so we've appealed the case immediately from the federal trial court to the federal appellate court, and we appealed back on June 21st. And again, we got that stay on the district court's ruling, so it makes the assault weapons ban continue to remain in full force and effect during the pendency of the appeal. And we're going to be filing our briefs. It's our written materials, our written arguments that presents the law and the facts as we see it. In the fall, the opponents will respond and file their opposition briefs soon thereafter, and then we'll file a final sort of reply to their response. And there'll be a hearing date set. We'll argue the case in front of the court, answer the questions, and maybe get some insight and hear some of the thinking of the judges on the 3-judge panel, and then we'll get a ruling. And hopefully it'll be a ruling that gets us back on track with and in conformity with the rest of the nation. There's 5 other federal circuits that have ruled on similar issues and found that assault weapons bans are constitutional and lawful. And there was even a case here in California, a federal case that found the same. So this case is an outlier, and we want to bring it back in touch with the overwhelming weight of authority in this space, and hopefully we'll achieve that in front of the appellate court.
Yeah, awesome. And that's really important to hear that that case is an outlier, and that there are countless other cases across the country that have said that assault weapons bans are constitutional and don't infringe on Second Amendment rights. So this law has actually existed for more than 30 years. So what impacts does this law have on everyday Californians? And is it shocking? Should we be concerned that we've seen that it was struck down?
I think it was pretty remarkable that it got struck down after over 3 decades of existence. The impact of the law has been, very simply, it has saved lives. It has made our communities safer. It has avoided and prevented avoidable deaths from gun violence, and so it has worked. It has been serving its purpose. We need it to continue to stay there, to continue to serve its purpose, protecting lives and saving lives from assault weapons and from loss of life from assault weapons. So there was the original law was passed in 1989, and then an amendment took place, was implemented in 2000, which added what I was describing earlier, that flexible features-based definition of what is an assault weapon. In 1989, there were specific brands and models that were enumerated, that were specified and specifically named. But then some of the manufacturers would create new models that were not enumerated, and that was the way they got around that ban. So we in 2000 had a features-based approach, and that's been in place for over 2 decades, and it's put first the safety of the people of California, as was stated in that March for Our Lives video that we opened up with. It has uplifted lives, and it has uplifted the people of California and protected them from senseless gun violence. So California has some of the strongest gun safety laws in the nation, and it also has one of the lowest firearm mortality rates in the nation. So, and those things are linked. The common sense, constitutional, lawful gun laws that we put in place save lives, and the assault weapons ban is one that has achieved that exact goal as well.
Thank you so much. My final question for this topic before I pass it over to Catherine. We've seen countless people come out and say that this is an attempt to take everyone's guns away. And every time that we see a bill in the legislature, even, we see difference coming out, and various even elected officials coming out to say that this is an attempt that we're gonna take everyone's guns away and have a communist state. All of these different things that they're trying to say, that we all know is not true. But a lot of other people, when hearing this type of rhetoric, may fall for it and think that this is a reality, that we can take all their guns away. So can you explain the specifics of the assault weapons ban and how it covers what it covers, and how it isn't an attempt to take everyone's guns away?
Absolutely, and I appreciate your distinction between some of the rhetoric and then the actual facts. And the facts are really important. I believe in data and evidence and science and facts. So let me share some of the facts about the assault weapons ban. It is obvious, it is clear that Californians and others throughout our nation who choose to responsibly own firearms have that right to own certain firearms and to use firearms for self-defense or for hunting or for sporting. And this assault weapons ban strikes a balance. It continues to allow for that, and while not infringing on the Second Amendment, and it focuses on certain types of weapons that are defined as assault weapons, and prohibits those. And those are generally semi-automatic weapons that have a certain type of powerful system for propelling the bullet out of the weapon called center fire, as opposed to the alternative, which is called rim fire. And if you have a semi-automatic center fire weapon with certain features, then those are defined as an assault weapons ban, or as an assault weapon, and you can't have it. And some of those features are things like a collapsible stock, or a pistol grip, or a forward pistol grip, a flash suppressor. Those are some of the features that help define what an assault weapon is. You could have none of the features, and then you can still have a semi-automatic center fire weapon, or you can have a semi-automatic rim fire weapon that has all the features, and you can still legally possess those. So it's very specific and very detailed in terms of what it prohibits and what it doesn't. And basically what it prohibits are the most lethal types of weapons that we have seen in mass shootings, from Parkland to Poway, from Newtown to Las Vegas. And it says that those are going to be prohibited. Those are banned, but many other types of semi-automatic weapons, both rim fire and center fire, are still allowed. So it is not taking away everyone's guns. It is not a broad brushed approach to prohibition. It is a very narrowly tailored, focused and specific approach to making sure that the most lethal weapons, those that have been used in high profile, tragic, unacceptable mass shootings, and are the ones that are being prohibited, and only those.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as I am done with my questions for this topic about the firearms cases going on, I'm going to pass it over to Catherine, who's going to finish off this topic. Here you go, Catherine.
Thank you, Max. So, apart from this case, there's another key firearms case that your office is defending. That one involves California's law banning high-capacity magazines, Duncan versus Bonta. Can you tell us where that case now stands in the courts? There's also Rupp versus Bonta, which is in the courts. Can you elaborate on the significance of these cases?
Yes. So a lot of cases to keep our our focus on. The first one that we just talked about was Miller versus Bonta, and then I'll tell you a little bit about Duncan versus Bonta and Rupp versus Bonta as well. Duncan versus Bonta, as you mentioned, Catherine, is a case challenging California's ban on the acquisition and the possession of large capacity magazines, also referred to sometimes as high capacity magazines. And what are large capacity magazines and high capacity magazines? They are firearm magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition. So that's what's at issue. And in California, it has been illegal to manufacture or import or keep or offer for sale, give or lend large capacity magazines since way back in 2000. And it's been illegal to purchase and receive them since 2013. And in 2016, California voters passed a proposition called Proposition 63 that I know you're aware of, which added a ban on the possession of the large capacity magazines. And that ban was enjoined or blocked by the district court in 2017. And in 2019, the district court struck down all of California's restrictions on large capacity magazines. And just this last August, a appellate court, a 3-judge panel, upheld that district court's ruling. And then we, in the Department of Justice, the Attorney General's office, requested what's called an en banc review, which is a larger number of judges reviewing the case, and that was granted. That en banc review in February, and then we argued the case on June 22nd, not so long ago. And we've asked the panel to reverse the district court's decision and allow for the law to take effect that bans the possession of large capacity magazines. And so we're awaiting that ruling. And what is important to note is that the ban on the sale and purchase, manufacture, importation, and giving, lending, or acquisition of large capacity magazines, that remains in effect during the appeal. So similar to how it worked in the assault weapons ban, that the ban remains in place during the appeal. And so again, we're waiting that ruling on large capacity magazines. And then the Rupp case is another case in the Ninth Circuit, similar to Miller versus Bonta, that addresses the constitutionality of California's assault weapons law. And that decision was being held, awaiting the resolution of Duncan versus Bonta. So we're going to need to get the final resolution on Duncan versus Bonta first. And then once we get that decision, then the Rupp case will be resolved. And then Miller will be the last one, just based in how it's last in time going through the process to be decided. So if you can keep all those cases in order, then you're doing an amazing job. But they are Duncan and Miller and Rupp, and they all have really important implications for what we're all here to talk about, which is how to keep people safe from senseless gun violence.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining what each specific case does and the whole court processes that go with it. With these 3 recent cases, do you think this is all, or do you expect to see more cases arising? Why is it important that we all continue to defend sensible gun violence prevention laws?
What we've created in California has been strong. It's been effective. It is common sense, and it has saved lives. And it's important that we protect and defend the progress that we've made, the lives that we've saved, and make sure we continue to build and continue to do everything in our power to save lives. If we can, through a common sense, constitutional, lawful law, save a life, we should. And so it's important that we defend from these challenges, these important laws, especially these 3 decades old laws that have been saving lives for decades, and that we continue to protect as necessary any other challenges to California's gun safety laws, such as California's background check requirements for ammunition purchases and minimum age purchasing restrictions at licensed dealers. And, we don't know exactly what's coming in the future, but we have seen challenges. It is more rare than common to see a challenge to over 3-decade-old law that has been in place, and the likes of which has been upheld many times before in many parts of the country. So we might see more challenges, and if and when we do, we'll rise to the occasion and defend our laws from these attacks and make sure that any constitutional, lawful, common sense law that saves lives remains as part of California's common sense regime to protect people from gun violence throughout our state.
Yes, I totally agree. We will be switching to the gun violence restraining court orders. Can you talk to us about what it is and how they can help prevent gun violence?
This is a really important tool to keeping people safe from gun violence, and it's one that not as many people are aware of. And I think we'd all benefit as a society. We'd be safer if more people knew about it. So I'm really happy and excited to be talking about gun violence restraining orders. It's very important, of course, that people feel and are safe in their homes and in their neighborhoods, at work, at school, and their places of worship. And unfortunately, tragically, we have seen that hasn't always been the case. We've seen everyday places, movie theaters, and churches, and synagogues, and offices, and holiday parties, and bars and concerts as places where there have been these horrific, tragic mass shootings. And so it's important that we use every tool that we have to prevent gun violence in our communities from happening in the first place. And red flag laws, which gun violence restraining orders are a form of, and so are domestic violence restraining orders, are tools that can help prevent the gun violence from happening in the first place. And what they do is they allow someone, a law enforcement official, a family member, a friend, a coworker, an educator who might have knowledge of someone who is a risk of hurting themselves or others, to be able to petition for the gun violence restraining order, for the GVRO, and a court, an independent entity and body, will review the petition to see if it's justified, and if so, can remove from the possession of that individual for a period of time any firearms that they might have, and in doing so, prevent someone from getting hurt and maybe even killed.
Thank you for explaining GVROs. San Diego County has issued a record number of GVROs. Last year, 37% of GVROs issued in California were from San Diego. This has saved potentially hundreds of lives. How do you hope to expand the further utilization of GVROs to save more lives across the country?
San Diego has really been a model, and on the cutting edge, leading in the use of GVROs. So I'm really glad you asked about this question. I was recently in San Diego talking to San Diego City Attorney Mara Elliott and Police Chief David Nislight to talk about what they've been doing. And they work very well together. They are very committed to avoiding any senseless gun violence, and using gun violence restraining orders as a powerful tool to be able to prevent that gun violence from happening in the first place. So they've worked collaboratively and effectively to make sure people know about GVROs, and that then they are pursued in court, and before a judge, and that they get that the restraining orders are issued as appropriate, consistent with the law. And they do have, as you mentioned, that 37% of all GVROs issued in California are right in San Diego. And I think if more jurisdictions, if more cities and more counties were aware of the efficacy and power of GVROs to save lives and prevent senseless gun violence, then we could increase safety from gun violence throughout the state of California. So I spent time with them to learn more about their secret sauce, and how they're getting it done the way they are, and am working to scale that knowledge and the work that they've so effectively modeled to more jurisdictions who I'm hoping will see the power of GVROs and use them more in all the appropriate ways that are allowed by the law to keep people safe from gun violence.
Yes, you just explained and mentioned how GVROs have really helped save a lot of lives and promoting how to end gun violence. But with great laws like this, there is of course the risk of them being abused by corrupt prosecutors and law enforcement officers. How can the Attorney General's office make sure that GVRO laws are not abused by law enforcement or malicious prosecutors?
Yeah, it's really important that the law for GVROs is followed the way it's been set forth. So the training with respect to how GVROs work is important. The way the GVRO is structured is really important. So you have a judge who is the backstop and as an independent branch of government to make sure that the GVRO is being used in an appropriate way, not an abusive way. So the judge can always determine that the GVRO should not be issued if they think that the basis and the facts are not there to justify it. And one thing we learned from the San Diego City Attorney's Office is that they really invested in training of law enforcement officers in the GVRO arena, so that they knew exactly how it works and how it doesn't work, how it's supposed to be used, and how it is not to be misused. And they also conducted, based on their knowledge and experience, certified trainings across the state to other jurisdictions, so they can learn the appropriate and proper way to use GVROs and not move into some of those prohibited spaces and misuse them. So that's very important. That the GVRO process and protocol is critical to follow, and there needs to be training to guard against any abuse and make sure that GVROs have the integrity that they were meant to have. So my office is not aware of any abuse of GVROs by law enforcement officers, and we must continue to be vigilant to make sure that there never is any. And if there were such allegations that came to my attention, we would, of course, make sure that there's appropriate accountability and take action as necessary.
Thank you. How can gun violence prevention organizations and even local organizations here in San Diego that focus on the rampant gun violence in communities, especially youth communities, these organizations, how can our support your office to further educate Californians on GVROs and how they can potentially save more lives?
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, what we're doing now is exactly what I think we need more of. As grassroots organizers and community backbone and champions to get out the word, talk to your networks about GVROs. I really think that gun violence restraining orders are underutilized and not there's not enough awareness about them, and they are a common sense way to be able to prevent and avoid some of the tragedies, some of the mass shootings, as well as the shootings that were not large numbers of people from happening in the first place. And the more knowledge there is about them, then they can be used appropriately and consistent with the law, and they can be used more often when maybe it was a step that could have been one that prevented the gun violence from happening in the first place. So getting the word out, maybe in addition to a conversation like this, having something posted on your website for easy access and review for those who want to learn more about GVROs. There are some websites that explain it in very simple terms, like who is eligible to seek a GVRO, how do you do it, how you apply for it. I think some people might say, I want to do that, but I don't know how. And if we can help them know how to appropriately petition for a gun violence restraining order, we could save lives by doing that.
Thank you for explaining all the ins and outs of GVROs and how even local communities such as ours can help spread the word about them. I'll pass it on to Max now, and he'll be talking about ghost guns.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So I want to spend some time touching on ghost guns, especially with this conversation because they are a increasing use of firearms across California. In San Diego, we saw 28-year-old Justice Bolden, who was shot and killed in the Gaslamp quarter of San Diego. And the firearm used in that shooting was a ghost gun. And then the perpetrator of that shooting, we won't name who that was, because we want to make sure we can focus on the victims and the solutions to prevent gun violence and not give perpetrators of gun violence airtime. Fired on another group of people and injured 4 other people, making the total casualty count up to 5, where 1 person was killed and 4 others were injured. So we really want to talk about ghost guns. So ghost guns are a major issue in San Diego County, as well as across California and across the rest of the nation. And we've seen that this issue is getting worse. So can you just explain what a ghost gun is, in really layman's terms, on what they are, and what the difference between them and other firearms are?
Absolutely. So ghost guns, in short, are firearms that are often untraceable by law enforcement because they are assembled by the purchaser, often in minutes, and those component parts are have not been regulated and are just not traceable. So that's the ghost part of the term ghost gun. It's the untraceability, the fact that they're not regulated like other guns, with a serial number and a dealer record of sale, and so that's the problem. And there's ghost gun kits, which are the component parts of a gun. They are sold by unlicensed sellers, and the purchaser, the person who's buying them, uses the kit to put together a firearm, and it's an untraceable firearm. So that's the challenge that we're facing, and this idea that you can sell these component parts online or elsewhere, that they're not being sold by a licensed dealer, they don't have a serial number, and then you assemble a gun using those parts in minutes, and then you have a fully functional weapon. The buyers of the kits don't currently have to undergo a background check, and again, you have an untraceable firearm without a serial number. So a lot of the protections, a lot of the regulations, a lot of the rules that we put in place to enhance gun safety, ghost guns have sort of an end run around, and it's a loophole that we need to be able to close.
Yeah, the ghost guns are terrible, and that loophole has led to the loss of so many lives across this country. I do want to actually say a San Diego-based activist that works with the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence and Team Enough actually was able, and I believe he was 17 years old, to go online and purchase a ghost gun kit. And it was easy to put it together. And just saying that doesn't highlight how severe it is. So I actually want to play a quick video, if you're okay with that, that really highlights the severity of why it's so important that we address these ghost guns. So I'm going to share that real quick. Here we go.
I've heard it's really easy to buy ghost gun kits. I'm going to find out how easy it really is. So first off, I'm going to be doing a quick Google search of just ghost guns and seeing what pops up. Now that I'm on the website, I'm going to go to the 80% pistol. That's what I'm looking to purchase. here you see this item is out of stock. I go to another one, out of stock.
These kits, firearms, under the Gun Control Act.
I just purchased the super easy, put in my billing information, put in my shipping information. It's gonna come to me in a few days. It's really that simple. This is the slide, this is the barrel, this is the slide spring, and as I said, this is the lower receiver. And now I just have to do very light assembly here. Like, these are not complex tools. I can just find a video online of how to do it and just follow the video. That's all it would take to assemble a untraceable 9mm handgun.
Yeah, that is scary to see how easy it is to assemble a ghost gun. And I do want to credit the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence in that video. They were the ones who created that video. But it's insane how, in that video, how easy it was for him to scroll down and purchase a ghost gun, and seeing that most of those were sold out. So that means a ton of other people were going on and purchasing ghost guns. So what really can be done about this to prevent that, especially young people, people who are under 18, prohibited from getting firearms, and people who are under 21 who are prohibited from getting certain classifications of firearms? What can we do to prevent them from being able to purchase a firearm that easily?
That was a powerful video. I agree, and frightening in how effectively it shows how easy it is to buy a ghost gun, and to avoid all of the rules and regulations that one normally needs to follow to purchase a firearm. So, in response to the question, I think what President Biden said in the video really sums it up, that these ghost gun kits and ghost guns need to be treated like any other gun, and have all of the regulations and requirements that have been put in place to make sure that we enhance safety to the greatest degree possible. So it's really important, and whenever possible, for the federal government to act broadly to create gun safety laws that apply everywhere. That saves more lives, provides more safety from senseless gun violence. So I really thought what President Biden said in that video was very powerful. That we can also do more here in California, specifically, both in the California Department of Justice, my office, as well as in the California State Legislature and the governor, in terms of laws that they've put in place, and perhaps other ones. It's just like the assault weapons ban. We had certain enumerated, specified weapons that were identified as assault weapons, so it was clear exactly which ones were prohibited, and then there were designer rounds, so to speak, where new assault weapons were being designed to get around the ban, and so we needed to have the features, flexible features-based approach, and this is sort of a design around as well, around all of the safety regulations that we have in place. Ghost guns, go through that massive loophole, and we need to close it. And the California Department of Justice has, in my view, taken nation-leading efforts to tackle the rise of ghost guns, and we're committed to doing more, and we're not going to stop. We're going to, we took on the Trump administration when it tried to loosen regulations governing blueprints for 3D printed ghost guns. We took the Trump administration to court. We joined the Giffords Law Center, and we led a coalition in filing a lawsuit against the ATF from the Trump era, and we demanded that the ATF regulate the unfinished pistol frames and rifle receivers that are used to make ghost guns the same way it regulates other firearms. And we took on a took legal action to force a gun store selling ghost kits in San Diego, by the way, to comply with a subpoena. And we've also seized illegally held ghost guns throughout the state and through our armed prohibited persons system enforcement and other ways. And so we're going to continue to use the legal authority that we have and the tools that are at our disposal to prevent the proliferation of ghost guns and keep our community safe. I know that some cities are doing more as well, including the city of San Diego had a ghost gun ordinance that it was working on, and it's appropriate for folks at all levels of government, from local to federal, to see this challenge and problem for what it is and to take common sense steps to address it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that is another thing that you brought up with the city of San Diego and across San Diego County, that ghost gun ordinance. So March for Our Lives San Diego, back a couple months ago, sent a letter to the leadership in the county of San Diego. So that's Mayor Todd Gloria, the city council, and then the county board of supervisors, just calling attention to the issue of ghost guns and calling out the need to increase local ordinances to prevent ghost gun violence and also to educate people on safe storage of firearms. I do want to read a small excerpt where we cited some data from the San Diego Police Department on the handguns and long guns that they've recovered. And this was from February to April. And ending in April is where this statistic is from. So since then, we've probably seen a increase of ghost gun recoveries. So according to the data from the San Diego Police Department, 25.82% of handguns and 14.19% of long guns recovered by the San Diego Police Department were ghost guns. And from February to April, there was also an increase in ghost gun recoveries. Unfortunately, this epidemic has continued to worsen this year due to ghost guns. So with that said, we see the overwhelming use of ghost guns. And like I said, from February to April, the numbers increased. So what can we do specifically as the Californians? What can the state legislature do specifically, and what can your office specifically do to prevent the overwhelming use of ghost guns in crimes across the state?
Yeah, the organizations like yours are always important in terms of pressing the issue, pushing the urgency, raising, sounding the alarm when lives are at stake. And so it's so important to continue to push our leaders at every level, whether it be the city of San Diego or the state level or the federal level. And in California, we have some of the nation leading laws in so many policy spaces, certainly including our efforts to address gun violence. And we have right now in California laws around ghost guns that mandate anyone who possesses or manufactures or assembles lawful firearms in the state to apply to the California Department of Justice for a unique serial number for each of their self-made firearms. So that makes them traceable, what was once untraceable. That ghost part of the ghost guns that we were talking about earlier, by putting a serial number on the gun, gives it a unique identifier and makes it traceable. So that's a current law that's in place in California. And then there's a law that has not come into effect yet, but will on July 1st, 2022. So in about a year, that will require the sale of certain ghost gun kit components to be done through licensed dealers and ammunition vendors or firearm precursor part vendors, they're called. So it'll be done by licensed providers, licensed sellers, and this will require a background check and a sale record, among other requirements when purchasing a ghost gun kit. So again, some of those things that aren't required now when ghost gun kits are sold online so easily, as we've seen in the video, will be required on July 1st, 2022. Licensed dealers will need to sell them, and there'll be a background check and a sale record as well. So these are all good developments in California. These are laws that make formerly untraceable firearms traceable, and makes the sale of ghost guns subject to the same requirements as other legal firearm purchases. So, and the DOJ can, my office can enforce these laws, can make sure that they're not being violated, that make sure that the people who are supposed to benefit and the policies that are supposed to be implemented by these laws are actually implemented.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that, especially talking about the upcoming law going into effect next year. With that said, in addition to that law, what other laws are in place right now that can prevent ghost gun crimes?
I think those are some of the ones at the state level that are in place, and you know, as cities as well, like San Diego, implement their ordinances that provides another layer of safety. The requirement of serial numbers based on the city ordinance in San Diego is another good one. And then, you know, it's important that we not be stagnant, that we not be complacent. That, you know, as challenges or arise, or you know, design around or end runs around the law are pursued, that we close the loopholes wherever they exist to make sure that we have a, you know, singular, unified regime for gun safety that applies as many places as possible and keeps as many people safe from senseless gun violence as possible.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. That wraps up that topic of ghost guns. We wish that we could dedicate a whole session of this to ghost guns because there's so much to talk about. So who knows, maybe another time. But right now, let's just go into a couple of miscellaneous questions. I'm actually going to pass it over to Catherine real quick, and we're just going to jump back and forth asking a couple questions that when we were prepping for this conversation that came up. And then after that, we're going to jump into a couple little fun questions. So I'll pass it over to Catherine.
Thank you, Max. As you know, March for Our Lives focuses primarily on gun violence prevention, but there are so many local and community-led organizations here in San Diego that focus on their own specific communities and the disparities that are happening in those communities as well. Why do you think it's important for these organizations to fight for gun violence prevention on a daily basis as well, even though they aren't, you know, directly in line with that?
I mean, I think it's so important that when we see the need for change, that we demand it and cry out for it, and hold accountable those who can create that change and make sure that they hear from the people. That's what our democracy is about. That's how it works. Our representatives are there at the will of the people, and to help the people, and to be their voice, and to take the steps that are necessary to create the common future and the shared future that we want together. And that includes a shared common future free of senseless gun violence. And sometimes complacency can set in, or different priorities can move in to bump out another priority. And it's important for community organizations that fight for gun violence prevention to do it on a daily basis, to keep the drumbeat going, to make sure that we never forget the tragic lives lost and the incidents that have unfortunately been part of something that's unique to America, and to not allow it to be normal. It's not normal, and we can't accept it, and we can't accept the unacceptable. And so we need to call for the change with the urgency that you have called for it with, and that's how we're gonna. That's how change is made. It's everyday people raising their voice, exercising their democratic rights to demand change. And you know, we have a gun lobby that doesn't want to see the change, and but we have people power, and people power always wins. And but people power is not a spectator sport. It requires getting on the field and getting engaged and being active every day, like you mentioned. So you know, your voices are strong, they're heard. Grassroots community organizations who tell their stories, of impacted individuals, tell their stories as moms and brothers and sisters and loved ones and friends and fathers, worried about the safety of their loved ones or suffering, unspeakable tragedy because of gun violence. There's nothing more powerful than that. So, your voice is your power. It's heard, and it will lead to change.
Thank you. I remember you mentioned earlier that instead of saying like youth is the power of tomorrow, it's the power of today. And I just think that's very inspiring in line with this because, people power and youth power, and with all our voices together fighting for what needs to be done. I'll pass it on to Max now to ask the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I do just want to say we did just get notification that you are running out of time, so we're gonna speed this along as we wrap this up. But we've seen, as data from the Gun Violence Archive has reported, just as of today, and we're a little bit past halfway through the year, there's been the total number of gun violence deaths across the country are 25,598. Let's just let that sink in for a second. That's a very large number. That it's a terrible number, and a number of there's 25,598 too many numbers on there.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of a threat to our society do you believe that gun violence really is?
A tremendous threat. Gun violence is an American disease, something that is unique only to America, and we must work for the cure. And again, we can't accept it as normal, and so we can't accept it as part of what happens regularly in America, because it's not. And so I think that it's a huge threat to our society, gun violence is, and we cannot allow one more person to experience the pain of losing a loved one from avoidable gun violence. We can't allow one more family to wait for a call or a text that never comes. We need to always center and keep top of mind the impacts on real people that gun violence has created for such a long time in the United States. And so, we need to do everything that we can to make to reduce those numbers that you just talked about. So tragic, every one of them, not just numbers on a page, but real lives lost, people who will never realize their dreams or see their family again. We always need to remember the personal, the humanity in each of those numbers and those data points. That's what they represent: real lives of fellow Californians and people in this nation who we've lost and that we ought not have. And so some of our prevention programs are going to be really important to address the significance of this problem. Things like Operation Peacekeeper and Operation Ceasefire in Stockton that I visited recently. The use of the gun violence restraining orders will help prevent. And they're leading and modeling how to use them well in San Diego. We need to continue to ask the federal government to step up and pass universal background checks and red flag laws and reinstate the assault weapons ban at the federal level. It's so important, and we'll take the lobby to court here in California to make sure that our nation-leading gun safety laws help to prevent the next mass shooting at a school or a mall or a workplace. Also continue to work to confiscate illegally held firearms from individuals that courts have already deemed are too dangerous to possess those firearms. So it's a huge problem, and we need to use the toolbox to address it.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it back to Catherine for her last question to you.
This is just a fun question, and you mentioned earlier before about your parents and your family and how they truly were the inspiration for you. And just hearing that story, I'm a Filipino American as well, it is very inspiring how you and your family are very involved as activists. But why did you become an attorney? And honestly, what is the best part of being the Attorney General?
You know, I became an attorney because I was inspired by my parents and their legacy of change and their commitment to social justice, and I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to take on the mantle and pick up the baton and do my part. And you know, I had parents who believed in me and made me believe I could go to college, and made me believe that when I told them that after reading To Kill a Mockingbird, I wanted to be Atticus Finch, because if that's what lawyers are, fighters for justice and fighting for what's right, then I wanted to be one. They made me believe I could go to law school. And that sort of at its core was what has always fueled me to become an attorney, to protect people who have been hurt, to keep people free of injustice or abuse, and basically to lift people up and help them, especially those who have suffered the most. So that's why I wanted to become an attorney, and I was inspired by the work of my parents to fight for those vulnerable communities, often voiceless communities, and to use the power of the law and the good that I was inspired to pursue from my parents to make this world better. And so that's why I became a public attorney. I worked in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office for almost a decade, and that's what inspired me to run for office. And now, as the California Attorney General, it's the privilege and honor of a lifetime to be able to be the people's attorney, to have the full weight and authority and power and influence of this incredible office, the second largest Department of Justice in the nation, second only to United States DOJ. Use that to help people and to use that power and share it with those who need it, who need a champion, who need a fighter, who need someone to see them and value them and protect them and make sure that they're being treated fairly and lawfully and appropriately. So the thing that excites me most about being California Attorney General is just the enormous influence and ability that it provides to help people. That in the end is why I got into public service and why I became an attorney. Simply put, to make people's lives better and to lift people up.
Thank you so much for your work and, just recognizing people and communities who usually don't get that voice and don't get that chance to see change happen. I'll pass it on to Max to ask.
Yeah, so as we go ahead and wrap this up, what is your message to the young people aspiring for a career in politics, law, and social justice? And what advice would you give to them?
My advice and my message is, we need you, and thank you for aspiring for a career in politics or law. Sometimes people have views of politics or the law that are not positive. I think being an attorney is a noble profession, and being an elected public official is a noble profession. And when used right, can create enormous change for the better in our society, and can help people improve their lives and improve their quality of life. And it can help end injustice and right historic wrongs. And so, if that's of interest to you, then a career in politics or law is a place where you should be. If you think that we have incredible potential to continue to grow and be and realize that dream and aspiration that we have to be a more perfect union, then go into politics and law to make that change, to help us get there. We need that next generation, next generation that disrupts injustice and bends that arc of history, towards justice. And again, I am super inspired by young people because of the change I've seen them fighting for already, because of that moral clarity that they have. There is no doubt about what is right and what is wrong, and that our gun violence in America is unacceptable. That we need that young people also see the same thing when it comes to climate change. That we need to do more. We need to do it faster. We need to be more urgent. And I seeing young people walk out of classrooms as part of, the climate protests, or, or March for Our Lives, or say, Black Lives Matter, or stand up against API hate. And that has given me confidence, incredible confidence and faith and comfort in the next generation. And the places where that change is going to be made is in and through the politics and the law. So if you want to make our world better, if you want to disrupt injustice and bend that, that arc of history towards justice, then politics and the law is your place.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Bonta. So that wraps up this event. Just like to thank everybody who viewed this event for attending. It's really important information that we really want to get out there. And if you want to come back and watch this again, this will be on our YouTube. So please come back and watch the event again and again to get as much information that you want out of it. If you have any other questions regarding any gun violence prevention measures, regarding extreme risk protection orders, the gun violence restraining orders, regarding those, or you need any type of assistance in San Diego regarding gun violence, the Attorney General's office, the City Attorney's office is always there for you. But I'd like to also just say, any questions that you have, anything, March for Our Lives San Diego is also here to help. So if you ever need assistance, our rapid response team that responds to victims of gun violence and their families, if you need assistance from us, there's a email that I'm sticking up here right there for you. info@mfwellsandiego.com. You can email us anytime and someone will get back as soon as possible. But again, thank you so much to everyone who was viewing this event. And thank you, Attorney General Rob Bonta, the People's Attorney. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Max and Catherine. I deeply appreciate your powerful leadership. I'm fired up to keep leading this work, doing my part, fighting for you and with you. And I want everyone who's watching and you, Max and Catherine, to know that as Attorney General, I have your back and I won't back down from the important fights ahead. And we can, if we organize and mobilize and stay focused, to end senseless gun violence together. So appreciate you all so much.
Thank you so much. Great. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Again, thank you so much to everyone who attended this event. If you liked what you saw, please follow us on our social media at MFOL San Diego, and join us in the fight to end gun violence by either contributing, donating to us, or joining us in marching in the streets with us. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a nice night.